discussion.
All right, at this time, I make the motion for Senate to accept the Constitution revisions and the subsequent.
Second.
Second. All right, as I said, we'll move to a 25-minute discussion on this topic. I'm gonna hand it back over.
Yeah, so the legislative committee, did our review of the revised constitution from the Constitution Revision Committee as constitutionally prescribed. And, we only were able to find, just small grammatical errors that we corrected, just added a few commas in some places and fixed some sentence structure. Everything of substance was still the same. All of it made sense and could be feasibly applied in almost all scenarios, but we went through it. I'll hand the floor over to Vice President Riley to go over the more in-depth stuff.
As you pull that up, I'll give context again for why this was done. Back in the fall, I sent out a memo to all of you saying that I was establishing a special committee, the Constitution Revision Committee, because as you look at our Constitution now, it is very outdated. There are office titles in it that no longer exist. There were so many amendments tacked on that it wasn't necessarily clear. And so if you wanted to look at, membership, you'd have to, flip around and it was kind of clunky. There was errors. So we went through and Pat will talk more about that.
Yes. So, hello, everybody. So the sheet that you have in front of you, it should be about 3 or 4 pages long, is all of the general updates, revisions that the Constitution Revision Committee that I chaired over the past few months has kind of come up with and was approved by the Legislative Committee, as Chairperson Kaufman had said. We're going to go through these kind of one by one. A lot of them are very minuscule, and just as President Albert said, just kind of updating a lot of information that just was non-existent, that we were not necessarily reflecting, but now will be reflected in going forward in subsequent Senate terms. You just kind of start. It's been called the Student Association Constitution for a long time. We're just changed it to Student Senate, and throughout the entire Constitution, I've referred to Senate or anything else that's subsequently called it just to the Student Senate, just for consistency purposes, just so we're all talking about the exact same thing. And again, Student Association is no longer present in this document. It is student body, as we're referring to the entire student population that that this Constitution applies to as it regards to the senator's responsibilities and duties. We also made an attempt to make gender neutral language when referring to senators or executive board members and their responsibilities, their roles, their eligibility, and things like that, just to make sure that everybody kind of feels included when running for student senate and that they're reflected in this Constitution. I'm going to jump to the bottom real quick. There is an important new change, a new article that has been added that will be starting. Does this Constitution be approved by you and the student body starting next term? But this will be a rules package. So it's typically similar to how the House of Representatives functions. After the members are sworn in, they have to vote on and adopt a rules package that basically governs the rules, logistics, and functions of the student senate more internally. That's not constitutionally prescribed, but it's not necessary to be constitutionally prescribed. Essentially, it'll, the rules package will be proposed likely by the legislative chairperson to be approved on and voted on. That must be approved by the first Tuesday in May. So there's time in between the start of the new term of Senate to actually have these rules adopted, just so they can conduct more formal business. I like the vice president is going to bring forward this motion up the legislative because the typical role of the vice president is to maintain these logistics and functions and things like that. No motions can be brought forth in this except for the approval of the rules package, a call to order the Senate meeting, and the adjournment of the Senate meeting. So no business, no motions, no votes, no allocations can happen during this time until this rules package is adopted. All senators will have access to it, will be able to make amendments as necessary to them if they feel that certain rules and certain obligations should not necessarily be met, and that will go through deliberation and debate through the typical amendment process to the rules package. And stuff like that. So that's one major article change that's going to be occurring there. Some of the articles, if you look at the previous edition of the Constitution, were kind of in a wonky order, so we were kind of going back and forth in terms of how to make the layout of it more thorough and elaborate. So when it comes to like describing the executive board and their subsequent committees and responsibilities, we organized the articles in this order. executive board, the powers and duties of the executive board, which is a name change to just or executive board powers. The standing committees, that's like the legislative committee, the campus relations committee, the public relations committee, the finance committee, and the elections committee, which was not previously a standing committee, but has been made to a standing committee because elections have to occur every year. That's just gotta be the way it is. And after that will be special committees, the meetings, how they basically are structured, and then elections, if that kind of makes sense. We removed the requirement that members of the executive board have to have prior Senate experience or be an elected student senator in order to be eligible to run for the executive board, because we want to guarantee an equal opportunity for anybody who's really passionate about student senate, but just doesn't have a lot of experience to actually, gain that position and have a voice at the table on the executive board. If a current voting member, though, is elevated to the role of an executive board member, they will lose their voting right. So as you currently know, Chairperson Kaufman and Chairperson Marcel currently have voting rights as they retained from their previous constituencies when they were elevated to the executive board. That's no longer going to be the case. All executive board members are no longer going to have voting rights with the exception of the president and the vice presidents. We updated the powers and duties of the executive board positions and their respective standing committees and responsibilities, which you can see towards the back of this document. I'm not going to read through all those because that's going to take way too long. We have a lot of stuff to talk about, but feel free to look through those, skim through those as I'm talking. If you have any questions, feel free to let me or Chairperson Kaufman know. We'll be able to answer them for you. There were a bunch of special committees that were listed in this constitution that I can kind of pull up right here. That were very outdated and were not necessarily followed, so we decided to just simply get rid of them because they no longer serve their purpose as it relates to our duties on student senate. So we had a bunch of the committees, but now we restructured them. So there's the class competition committee, which would be responsible for our Clash of the Classes events. The health and well-being committee, which is already currently a special committee that's formed and likely will stay because as it continues its work into subsequent terms. And the spring event committee. Spring event is an event sponsored by Senate, therefore they need a committee and an executive board to kind of fulfill their functions to put off a spring event program for the students here. And all those responsibilities of the committee are listed below subsequently. So hopefully you had a chance to look at this beforehand. Chairpersons of these special committees need to be elected representatives of the student senate, so that could be voting members or the president or vice president. But the members of the committees do not need to be on Senate whatsoever. So that can be up to the discretion of the chairperson of that committee, whether they would prefer student senators to be on it or non-student senators to be on it. Hopefully they would, to have better input from both constituencies. Again, another simple change. We branded the elections in the fall and the spring elections to the fall midterm elections, which is just to fill up any vacancies in the fall and gives an opportunity for first year students who want a chance to be on student senates to serve and run at least for their class and for any other vacancies that are available. And the spring general elections where every seat is up for grabs, even though there are incumbents in place. We also removed any credit limitations regarding eligibility. So there for senators, you needed to, if you were above a certain number of credits, you can no longer serve on Senate or on the executive board. That is gone. And we made it explicitly that if you are one semester removed from graduate status as determined by the university registrar, and those who are interested in pursuing study abroad opportunities in a semester in which they would no longer be here to serve their duties on Senate, they will not be permitted to run for student Senate or vote. We clarified pretty explicitly that no person can run for more than one student senate position on campus. This was a little bit vague in the language. We just made it explicitly clear. You can't run for College of Arts and Sciences rep and class of 2024 rep. That's just not possible. You can't serve in those constituencies. We made that abundantly clear. We designated the chief experience officer of the university and the director of student involvement educations to serve as our advisors who will come into these meetings, who will serve in general meetings and give us advice and consent as a typical advisor would for any club and org on campus. We also clarified that no funds can be appropriated from the student activities fund without the approval of the student senate through a majority vote unless otherwise stated in any active student senate policies. Which can be found in the treasurer's manual, which chairperson Kroll is responsible for updating every once in a while. We included a separate impeachment process for executive board members. So before there was just an impeachment process for president, vice president, and any elected senator. Now that we have no executive board members having the block, we needed to include some sort of provisions for them. And those provisions are right here. If you give me a second. In this newly created section, they can be impeached by any one of these following methods. So 1/3 vote of the student senate, via motion that shall be made by the president of the student senate. Very similar to the process for impeaching a voting senator, except that there is no requirement for a petition by the student body to be made to get a certain percentage in order for an impeachment to be valid. So that was another change that we had made there. We included a thorough process for vacancies of the executive board in the line of succession that is listed below on this document. So essentially, again, if the president leaves office before their term is expired, the vice president will assume the role of president until the expiration of the term. The vice president leaves and the president is going to nominate someone to replace the vice president, and the Senate shall confirm that nomination with a majority or 2/3 vote or majority vote.
2/3.
2/3. If both the president and vice president, for some reason, leave office before the expiration of their terms, the legislative person will assume the role of president and will serve. And will be responsible within 2 weeks of the vacancy of both of those positions, which would be legislative chairperson and vice president. In that case, they will have 2 weeks to fill those positions up again, and that's with any vacancy on Senate, on the E board at least. And the Senate will need to approve those successors with 2/3 majority vote. For a line of succession, if for some reason the president, the vice president, and the legislative chairperson are unable to serve for their terms, the succession for president of the student senate will be as follows. It'll be the finance chairperson that will assume the role. If they're unable to do it, then the campus relations chairperson will assume the role. If they're unable to do it, the public relations chairperson will be able to assume the role, and the secretary will be able to assume the role. That is the line of succession from there. We removed, so if you had taken a chance to look at the current Senate Constitution, there were amendments that were made throughout the passage of this Constitution that made changes to certain requirements. We got rid of those and incorporated the language of those amendments into the Constitution throughout. Some of them I've already mentioned to you already, but some are just spelled out through there. So if you wanted to compare, you could. We also added College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences reps and athletics and recreation reps. And throughout the Constitution, those were 2 recent amendments that were made, and now they're included in the language of the Constitution because they're standing senators, so they deserve to have that distinction. And we also refined the responsibilities of the ranking members, which shall be designated by each standing committee, and the responsibilities of which will largely, for the most part, be left up to the designation of the chairperson of the committee. We also clarified the transition process. So this is something that you'll see in the coming weeks. But this was not spelled out in the Constitution for some reason. But we clarified that the outgoing president of the student senate will swear in the new president, which will unofficially start the new term. Then once the new term starts, the new president will swear in the newly elected vice presidents. That's the standard. That's what we've done the past few terms, but now it's just put in the Constitution clearly. In talking about vacancies, we came up with a plan for class representative positions. Should those become vacant, which is listed in the vacancy section of the Constitution that I'll read to you briefly. Should there be a vacancy with a class representative position, the class council shall have the opportunity to nominate a student from their class year to fill the vacancy. If 2/3 of active class council members from that class year approve the nomination, then the student senate shall also hold a vote to accept or reject that nomination of the member. If both their respective individual class council and the student senate confirm the individual, then they will assume the role of their respective class year representative on the student senate until the term naturally expires. So it'll give the council a little bit of insight into who they feel should represent their class going forward from there. There was a conversation in this committee about alternates. So serving on committees should a voting senator for some reason not be able to fulfill their duties as a voting member and during committee work. We decided that that would be left up to the discretion of the chairperson of that committee. How involved that they would like those alternates to be will be left up to them. And going back to vacancies again, I should have put this in order. Clarified a specific process for that, which you can read below. And then we also clarified that any representatives who changed their class or their designation, so let's say they were in the College of Business, they were a finance major, and then all of a sudden they wanted to change to actuarial science and now become part of the Arts and Sciences College. They would have to resign their seat as College of Business representative immediately, or they will face removal if they do not resign from their seats and then run again in the next election for Arts and Sciences if they so chose to. The last change on here on this document relates to CAB. So we have Chairperson Sigler who serves as our CAB chairperson. There will no longer be a CAB chairperson on the executive board for Student Senate, but they will still assume the responsibilities of the president of the Campus Activities Board. And the Student Senate president who typically had the power to interview and appoint the CAB president for the new year will no longer have that power under their designation. To maintain the relationship between CAB and Senate, what was decided was that either the Student Senate president or the newly selected CAB president would be able to create a liaison that would represent CAB, who will come to Senate weekly to report on CAB events and any concerns they have had. That was a lot, I know, of changes. They're all listed in the Constitution. I will take questions. Chairperson Kaufman will take questions. Did you have any? I leave before you.
At this time, I'm going to move to amend Article 11, Section 3. So it will state the following: the chairpersons of committees A, B, and C, as mentioned above, are not required to be elected representatives of Student Senate.
Second. We'll move into a 5-minute discussion on this amendment.
So just really quickly, this would basically, I don't know how we oversaw or like completely missed that, but basically the past few chairs of spring event, if we had this stipulation as it is now, would be ineligible. So, and including the appointed executive. So Chairperson Barrett Miller, if this was the rule, would not be a co-chair of spring event, so wouldn't co-chair of Alcord. And then also Sam Sterner from last year. So just so anyone can come forward and apply to be the chairs of those special committees, and it's not limited to just senators, just to keep with previous traditions and also what we discuss, because it makes no sense that we keep open the executive board and the eligibility for people to run for everything else and then just not have it for that. So for consistency reasons, put that in.
So it just allows the same thing before, that you don't have to be a part of Senate to be the spring event chair.
Yeah.
So this just corrects that. All right, any questions or comments about this amendment? All right, hearing none, we're gonna move to a voice vote on this amendment. So if you agree with what he said, with removing the barrier that you have to be a member, a student senator in order to be one of those special committee chairs, like spring event special classes, that's what we're voting on. So we'll voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Those abstaining? Motion accepted. All right, we can go back into our conversation, and on the clock, we are at 18 minutes, so we have about 7 minutes left in the moment. So yes. Senator.
I'm just curious about the reasoning behind the CAB chairperson amendment, so I just want to know like what, how that.
Yeah, Chairperson Crawford, I miss anything, feel free to let me know, but I think for the most part, we did not feel that it was fair that Senate had the essential oversight of picking like who the main leader of the Campus Activities Board would be. We wanted to give that to the respective club, that power, just so they can have their leadership reflected in however methods that they want. How they so choose. It just didn't seem fair that the Student Senate president had that sole authority to pick the CAB president.
Yes.
So does that mean that CAB will not be a subcommittee of?
Moving forward, yes, they would be their own organization. And for context, you both have met with representatives from CAB to just make this decision. Yeah, so this is something that they've worked with, but they can talk more about that.
If I may add to it, the relationship between Senate and CAB, to my understanding, has changed over the years. CAB was originally just like a normal standing committee at one point of Senate. And it's kind of just become more vague in how exactly that relationship is supposed to operate, to a point where it just really didn't make sense to draw lines where they were drawn. So it felt fair to just give them the autonomy that they deserve, similar to other organizations on campus.
Floor remains open for questions or comments. Couple of things that I want to add. So for a lot of these changes we read, you're probably asking yourself, oh, like why were these changes made? I just want to get some context. So kind of running through what I think are the most important things here. So first one that we kind of talked about was the rules package. I think the rules package is so important because we do not have bylaws. We do not have any governing documents outside of our Constitution and kind of our treasurer's manual, but like even our approval of that is just like precedent. So this gives, without having a rules package, it gives a lot of authority, you know, like unjust authority to the president and the e-board to kind of just run meetings however they so desire. And this kind of, again, puts a check on that, but then gives all the senators a say that we all debate and agree that this is how we're going to run our meetings. So for those unfamiliar with the rules package, can you give a brief explanation of what it is?
Yes, so I'm actually working on a draft one for both next term and for terms going forward to refer to. How it's basically going to do, or how it's basically going to work, is it's meant to fill in the gaps of this Constitution. The Constitution will be the law of Senate, but the rules package will be how Senate operates on a day-to-day basis. So it will draw the lines of exactly who has authority in regards to what when it's not specified in that document, and how exactly Senate is supposed to operate, how exactly the committees are supposed to operate, what powers like that we have traditionally used, like what stipulations should we have on those powers, like with budget freezes, with Senate expenditures on Senate, how much money can we spend on ourselves as a Senate? Things like that. It answers those questions and puts regulations on us as a check and a balance.
It'll be helpful for our organization, but other clubs and organizations so they can see like specific policies and stuff like that. The next thing, the voting right of the e-board. I think this is, you know, an important move to take this off because what are you, your commuter?
Yes.
So Camden right now, or Chairperson Coffin is a commuter rep. So as legislative chair, he's voting for the commuters. But right now his mind is a little occupied with legislative matters. And so instead of having, you know, another space open for a commuter rep, he holds that right. So if he had to relinquish that voting right, it would open up space for another commuter rep, meaning there's another senator here who can focus 100% to that position. Same thing with Chairperson Marcel, your resident. So I think it's just that it helps, you know, optimize representatives, stuff in that regard. Next, finances. That line we put in there about that funds shall not be appropriated without a majority vote of Senate, I think is so important because right now there is no mention of how we allocate our funds. So right now, this is not, but like, you know, there's a lot of discretion of what the chair could do, the finance chair could do to allocate funds, and there's little constitutional arguments against, you know, to call him out on that. So, if, you know, hypothetically, not that, you know, we're going to go doing this, but hypothetically, if, you know, Chairperson Perot wanted to allocate funds to someone without a Senate vote, we couldn't make a constitutional argument that he can't do that because there's no mention of it in the Constitution. So this just, it's really good financial policy in there to say that like no funds leave this organization unless we all vote on it or it's in the rules package. So it clears that up. Next CAB, but you already covered it. I think it's respectful to the organization to let them pick their own president. But that's all I'll say about that. Vacancies, class councils. I really don't like when we have vacancies on here because right now we have no 26 representative. And so we fortunately have a liaison coming. But in the future, with this policy, the class council, who does a very good job of speaking for the class, can get together and nominate someone that we would then, you know, approve, like we approve an e-board member who could then join the Senate, filling up that seat. And I think class would appreciate it because it comes from the council and the recommendation of elected e-board members. That's pretty much my, in a nutshell, explanation for why these changes are so important and why I really, endorse these revisions. Before we move forward, I'm gonna add 10 more minutes to this discussion. Is there any opposition to adding 10 more minutes to this discussion? All right, we'll get back into it. And I open the floor back up for questions or comments. Chairperson Coffin.
If I may, just to add on to like the executive board changes, this all kind of started with some ideas that we were talking about in terms of how exactly it was structured. And to be honest, I was a little confused with the current constitution because a lot of things weren't specified. A lot of things were just there and it just didn't make sense. So in the old constitution, it kind of had it so like, if you were to put the executives in a line to figure out who has power over who and who's in what positions, it was kind of weird because it would be president, vice president, legislative chair, the treasurer's kind of over here, the campus relations chairperson's kind of over here, then it's the PR, cab, and secretary all like kind of down here. I didn't like that. I said it should be president, vice president, all 5 of them going across. Well, obviously not without cab, so 4 of them going across. All of them should have equal playing field in terms of being executives. They all have the exact same way that they are appointed. They all have equal responsibilities as being chairs of committees and having responsibilities outside of those committees to both Senate and to the student body at large. So it just made the most sense to me, just philosophically in terms of like how exactly all that's supposed to work to just even out the playing field between all of them. And all of them still will retain the same abilities and stuff that they had before. In doing so, we made sure that in this document, we went through great lengths to ensure that everything could still play out the same way it kind of does now with them. But now it's just more clear that they are all equal.
Again, it's kind of like how it is now. It's just our constitution is so outdated. It doesn't even mention the word executive board in there. The executive committee is the president, vice president, and legislative chair.
Yeah.
So it's the constitution, except for, like the rules policy and stuff like that, isn't going to change our functioning. It's just we're updating it to match kind of how we do things now. But again, I'll open the floor to any questions or comments. Yes, Senator Meyer.
Referring back to the class council being able to nominate someone, would the nomination be like at any time, not necessarily during like spring elections or mid-fall term elections? Would it be at any time they can nominate someone if there is a vacancy?
It would have to be after the fall elections. So after the fall elections, if no one is appointed, then there will you can clarify and correct that.
Yeah, and also the class councils have stipulations on how they can fill vacancies already in their own constitution. So there are stipulations that they have to wait for those elections. They can't just fill them. Like if it's right before the fall election, they can't just say, I don't want this to be on the ballot. We need to fill it now. I made sure that that would not happen with the current council constitution when we passed it.
Good question. Yep, Senator Powers.
Going off of that, so would the person they like appoint with that person have to be from class council or anyone from the class?
Anyone from the class, anyone that's eligible to take that seat.
Thank you.
Floor remains open for questions or comments. Yes.
I have a question about the cab liaison. So since it's gonna be like a weekly report, will they have like a seat at the table? Just like not voting, just like a literal seat.
I can address that. So in the event, it depends ultimately on which organization appoints it. If both of them like are meeting to appoint it, if it's just from CAB, then that person would have basically be the same as Autumn over here, and be a liaison who sits in the gallery. But if they work together or the Senate president appoints one, then they'd be at the table because that's a Senate created liaison position. Now, assuming, I would hope that Senate has a good relationship with the organizations on campus. And since it's a level D organization, I would hope that they do sit down and work together to figure out who exactly that would be and where exactly they'll sit on Senate. But that's ultimately up to each individual administration as they come.
That answer your question.
I think that it might be good to have at least the liaison that have that relationship with have liaison have a seat at the table. If it's like a weekly thing. To me.
And I want to say that I do agree with you on that. That's why I think, but the way it's set up, that even if CAB doesn't appoint someone, then like the Senate president will, but
Yeah.
I think it's tremendous importance with, a liaison from CAB being in these meetings. So hopefully that gets worked out with the new administration. All right, so we're still open for questions or comments about this. If anybody has any, basic concerns or anything, maybe not like a question, but something that you don't understand, you feel free to bring that up. We'll talk about it. Just again, the floor remains open. I want to make sure that if we do pass this, you feel like you really understand it and you approve of everything.
Okay, just to clarify this process too, like if this is passed through this vote, then it will be moved on to an open referendum at the elections next Wednesday for the entire student body to vote on, and if they vote on it and accept it, then this will be the new law of the land for the student side. So just because it passes here does not mean that it's going to take effect yet until the student body votes on it next Wednesday.
And then things should time nicely so that when the new administration starts, it'll be under the new constitution with the new rules package. And then I just want to say, this is a great time for rules package because the first one you write is very, very tedious because you have to kind of define everything. And fortunately, we have, I would say, a judicial expert here who, who put that together. So now is a good time to implement something like that. But yeah, floor is open for questions or comments. I'm gonna let it wait a minute, let you all think. If you have any questions, if anything comes up, so. All right, seeing none, we will now move to a roll call vote on the acceptance of this revised constitution.
Senator Amaya,
Yes.
Senator Bundy,
Yes.
Senator Cloutier,
Yes.
Senator Jokito,
Yes.
Senator Hunt,
Yes.
Senator May,
Yes.
Senator Powers,
Yes.
Senator Sayer, Senator Walker,
Yes.
Senator Walton,
Yes.
Chairperson Kaufman,
Yes.
Chairperson Marshall,
Yes.
Vice President Riley,
Stay.
and President Outboard.
Yes.
12 yes votes, 0 no's, and 1 abstention.
With 12 yes votes, 0 no votes, 1 abstention, motion passes. Just want to emphasize how historic it is that we just passed this, and I'm excited for it to move on because our old constitution, the frame of it, so anything before the amendments has not changed since I believe the year 2000, so older than all of us at this table. So this is very historic, and I think this is something that will enhance our student government, make us more efficient, make us more transparent, and I think this is a very good thing. And I also want to shout out all the work done by Vice President Riley and Chairperson Kaufman with everybody else on the committee for their expertise and hard work on this process. So thank you. All right, moving on. So I have one thing I want to add for new and existing business. Just a quick update from our conversation last week about our student involvement discussion. I have been very pleased with the discussions that I've had with Upper Student Life about this and the path forward. But could I pass it off for an update?
So we reported to the executive group this week that one of the members of Student Involvement Connections is no longer an employee at the university. And if you have a connection to that office, you would have been notified of that as well. We also introduced Caitlin Bevins. Many of you might know her, but we formally introduced her to the executive board as the administrator assigned to improve all matters of student involvement connections, along with Bridget. Bridget would maintain and still is our director, and she is normally the one who would be responsible for this, but because Bridget's also got some medical issues going on that are reducing the amount of time that she can be here, it made sense for her supervisor, Caitlin, to step in. Caitlin has decades experience in student involvement, in programming, et cetera, so I think she'll be a great resource. They have outlined who is doing what between the three of them, so it's Caitlin, Bridget, and Amanda, and if you have any issues at all, please let us know. I also met with Leslie at IT to sort of continue to talk about ways that we can really make things a little easier, like some of the paper processes that we're still doing around budget. And so Noah and Cam and Sean and Pat and all of us will be discussing more about that this Thursday and subsequent weeks to make that process better as well. Because we think that the ordering and delivery system is not currently working, so we're looking at what other schools do. So if people have ideas about things that we can make better, please send them our way. If you're friends with other institutions that do things certain ways. And finally, with the recommendation of Sean and others, they're gonna meet with the student employees and try to determine ways that the student employees can take on more responsibilities, but not burden them with responsibilities that are normally assigned to professionals. I'm happy to answer any questions. I want to thank you for your patience. Bridget and I are both very grateful for the feedback that you gave us, and hopefully we've shown to you again that we can take these matters seriously. You know, we can't necessarily update you at all times when we're going along. So I thank you also for your trust and your patience. Any questions or feedback from me? Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
And I do want to say, thank you for, following up with this and being, following through with this. And I want to thank Caitlin Bevins for, taking the role, taking on this extra role. And I also want to thank Bridget for, how well she handled all of this during her, this medical leave. And I'm very excited about the path forward. And as Christine did say, I did really encourage, a greater utilization of the student employees. I think that can take a big, burden off of the day-to-day kind of tedious tasks that they work as student employees very efficiently in the office of finance and administration. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, anything else for new and existing business? All right, moving into visitors' comments. Are there any visitors' comments? Yes.
Okay, I apologize, sorry. My name is Anne Seibel. I'm gonna be representing WDK and GBTV specifically today. Specifically WDK. We do have members of GBTV board or president. We do have a bunch of e-board members here today. So I wanted to thank Senate, first of all, for dealing with the issues with student involvement, bringing it to light. We had been fighting for a very long time. I hope things can continue positively. And once again, I thank everybody on the campus relations chair. I thank you, Sean, for really dealing with this. I wanted to, now that we're past this, bring forward an issue we've been having regarding an additional allocation that we had requested at the beginning of this semester. We have not heard from Senate directly on the matter. In fact, we have received some conflicting information from multiple sources. I reached out to Sean Albert on February 13th, who thought that the issue had been resolved and that someone would reach out, but we haven't heard anything since. Fine, considering I know how busy you've all been between this student involvement, I can understand why. We just want to see if we can be granted this allocation for an advisor. We have Alex Russo from Media Services, and if the finance chair is hesitant, we would like to be allowed some time to explain our situation and why we need this advisor. I have created a list of things. It doesn't need to be today. I know it's busy, but due to the nature of this issue, it does need to be solved as soon as possible, or else our club will no longer be able to continue as we have been continuing.
All right, thank you. We'll move into a 10-minute discussion on this. And I do want to say, the fault would be on myself and not Chairperson Brawl, because I think we talked about this and I probably didn't very truly communicate that. So the communication could be on me. So I know we've been talking about this in the e-board, I know with HR and with Christine about the policy of giving stipends to advisors. We've never done it before, so we'd have to create some kind of policy. But do you have?
Yeah, I would like to request a meeting with you and a group of interested people to maybe brainstorm some other ways, because we've addressed the issue with the choral group and the band group, and even with most recently the dance group. I may be able to come up with some short-term funding, at least to get us through this year until we can figure things out. So perhaps a separate offline meeting that we can report back to this group next week with the update.
Sure. Is there a few things that I would be able to mention now as well? Just to explain.
That's up
Yes.
to them.
Yes, you have the floor. Yes. Yeah, I get back to you.
Sure. So I guess I'll skip the stuff about the stipend originally because we're gonna have a meeting. I'd just like to mention that our prior advisor not only managed our licenses for music and stuff, he managed the licenses for the entire school's music. And I want to say that that means if nobody's managing those right now, we don't even know who's named on those licenses right now, just to say. So we thought it would be updated to the new student involvement. However, there are two specific instances that make me wonder if that had happened. A, at the beginning of the year, so last semester, the company that allows us to broadcast, that's the only thing they do. They allow us to broadcast, kicked us out due to non-payment. So apparently the card that was used to pay them was never updated. A member of WKE board did hammer this out with Bridget to regain our functions. But just this prior week, the license that allows us to download music has gone from being paid to now being a free version, which means we can no longer legally download music and add it to our rotation. This concerns me because I'm worried now that the licenses that allow us to play music are now not being updated, which means, as I said before, this is completely integral to the function of our club. We cannot play amplified music. We cannot play music over the radio. We are in this limbo right now because we don't know who we can ask about this. We don't know whose names are on the license, and I would just like to reiterate, this is a serious legal issue. Even though we are not an FM station, we still broadcast music 24/7 online, and we currently don't know if we are allowed to be doing that. And that is the entire point of our club. We DJ, we play music. If we don't know what's going on, we cannot be a club.
I can answer some. The licenses that you're speaking to, there's two different ones. There's a broadcast license, which is the streaming, and there's a music use license, and there are actually multiple.
Yes.
So what happens is, and they keep popping up, right? So like 2 years ago, when I first got here, I had to make a decision about whether to give in to one of these groups, because otherwise we take the risk of them saying that we are playing it without their permission. But what happens is different artists move to different groups. And there's almost like no regulation on how many of these can exist. So they keep going up and up and up in price. At first there was one, then there was two, now there are three. And so we pay them all. Those are named by, it's not just for your student groups, it's for the entire campus. So those musical licenses are maintained through the Vice President of Administration's office with the help of someone. So it's either Basil Stewart's name or my name on them. And if those have lapsed, those should come directly to me so that I can find out why they've lapsed, because we have arrangements to have them paid through the finance. Okay. So just, yeah, I promise I have the same concerns that
Okay.
you do. And I actually wanted to find out about even your broadcast license. So this is good that we're connecting.
Yeah, that's the problem is unfortunately because we are students and we cannot be on these licenses, is I can't even tell you how many we have.
Yeah.
And we didn't really think about this because we are students and we cannot be involved in this licensing stuff. So it wasn't really an issue until last week when we realized we logged into this thing and it was no longer, we were not able to download music anymore, which is now, like I said, the second instance of a non-payment occurring, which made me wonder, how far does this go?
I'm curious, so who is your current advisor?
We don't have one. We haven't had an
Okay.
advisor since September 2022 when Ryan left.
Okay, do we have like a default policy, like someone?
Yeah, it should.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't mean to keep interrupting, but we met independently with Sam and with Bridget. And we were told by both of them that they would not advise us. In fact, Bridget told us that we should seek out other options. So when I talked to her about possibly having Alex on, she said, go ahead, go seek other options. And I don't want to burden them additionally in this time because we're now down a person, but we were specifically told by both of them that they would not advise us.
So we need to have somebody in student life to be, it's kind of like, that Bridget and I are both advisors to this group. So you have a content advisor and then you have a connection to the administration, right? So in this case, we need to have two advisors, right? You'll have somebody in the Office of Student Involvement and Leadership who's your liaison. And then you can have an additional faculty advisor.
Okay.
Or an additional stipend. So for the choral group, for example, we have Vanessa Ford, but they also have a connection to student involvement and connection to when they need things. So I want you to have both because without both, you're going to miss out on things.
Yeah, that would be wonderful because
Yeah.
Ryan fulfilled both of them for us. But if we had someone in student involvement and then we had a direct advisor, student involvement being, this is where all our contracts go through, all of our paid stuff. And then having just an advisor to help us. Because the other thing why we want Alex is because he's so versed in all of our technology. stuff we have never even opened in the radio. There are cabinets we don't even have keys to.
Exactly.
So,
And what we have to resolve is which advisors should be paid and shouldn't, and by whom. And that's one of the dilemmas we're sort of coming into right now that Sean was referring to figure out. So that's why I meant by, I think I can come up with a short-term solution because of a grant I have at the moment. And then we can work out these issues with the new administration, the new student senate administration about student activities and needed stipends.
you want me to email you? about
Yes,
this?
please.
I
I'm
will do
thinking
that.
right after this meeting, we'll set something up.
Perfect. I'm happy that would be resolved. And then, yeah, we'll keep we'll follow up on that, the subjects.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other questions or comments pertinent to this topic? All right, the floor remains open for visitors' comments. Are there any additional visitors' comments? All right, seeing none, we will now move into committee reports, starting with academic secretary. Thank you. Finance committee. Thank you. Legislative committee.
Nothing to report at this time.
It's always happened at the end of this. Campus relations committee.
We got approval to go ahead with the bulletin boards for the dining hall. So that order has just been requested, so, once it's in, I'll connect with Dave and he'll put it up. And we agreed that the PR chair and campus relations chair will just, continue to check it once a week, twice a week. Just to make sure, like posters posted anywhere else, that, the posters are appropriate and approved. And we're also gonna use part of the board to, display our club of the months to help give them a little spotlight. That's all I got.
Thank you. Public relations.
The minute summaries are coming back. I'm currently catching up on all of them for the term. And in regards to spring event, we are currently working on the artist release party. So if you want updates on when and where, check out the Instagram for spring event, WME spring event. And if you're looking to get some volunteer work under your belt, we are also have it with an application for volunteers. So please have that application.
Thank you. Campus activities board.
So we have, working under new advisory Caitlin Evans. So it's really transitioning, under her. And we have a few events coming up. This Friday, we have Comic-Con. I'm super excited for that. If you want dominoes, you want a game, you want a lot of free stuff, check it out. Come in costume. You'll, be able to possibly win a Iron Man helmet.
It's an Iron Man helmet that lights up.
Yeah. And yeah, and then next week, Tuesday. Oh wait, sorry, Comic-Con is this Friday, 8 to 11 in Rivers, by the way. And then, next Tuesday is Therapy Dogs, because, we're at that time of the semester, midterms, so if you want some stress relief by petting some dogs, please come. It's 12 to Tuesday. I know we have Senate, but you could go for a little while in the beginning, and then the day after we have somebody's disco night. So if you want free t-shirt, you should swing on by. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, Rivers committee. Which one is it?
After a meeting I had with Christine last week, a lot of clarity has been given about the situation. She will be meeting with the committee this Friday to further discuss any issues or concerns the committee has, and also maybe to try and figure out a better way of communicating between everyone involved with it, including every single person involved with each club. So everyone is on board with what's going on with Rivers, and there's no more confusion moving forward.
Glad to hear that things have improved so far. All right, anything else for Rivers committee? Any questions here? Concerns? Yep.
I just want to thank Cole. This is, Blanco, great job on the last committee, and some of you may have seen us, we were with the architects yesterday to look at the first floor of this building, to look at Rivers. And again, we want to do more around the food options, so I want to talk more about it, but the space in Rivers is the equivalent of trying to fit 100 things into space for like musical chairs. We have 100 people and 5 chairs. We are and Cole has been great about trying to keep that communication open. But I want to be clear with people that the Rivers renovation is, no one's going in there trying to kick us out of Rivers. There's an opportunity for an academic program for the engineering school around manufacturing, around the wind tunnel, that's unfortunately relocating a lot of offices out of that building. We're trying to figure out the best place to be, but space is limited. We also don't have a really good timeline, so we don't want the student groups to like pack up only to come back in the fall to find that they have to unpack again because the project didn't start. So I just want to really recognize that Cole's in a really tough situation, because it's not just a group of people making recommendations, a group of people with really personal, emotional interests in the use of that space and what they've had so far. So I just would ask you all for your help on this, to help sort of redirect people back to Cole, and that you'll keep coming into the committee. But like, this is not easy. I mean, if you walk through the space over there, it is the space, the amount of student space in Rivers, I think, equates to probably the entire first floor, and maybe more of this building. Meaning the entire first floor, like all the public space that can be. I don't know how we're gonna get that much space later, so people are gonna be unhappy at some point. And we wanna kind of navigate that as best we can. Like, this is not a making things necessarily better for them. It might make better space for the groups ultimately, but it probably won't be as much space. Cause so this just stinks. It's good for the university, it's good for academics, it's good for the programs of engineering. It is going to be a challenge for all of the groups who are currently in that space to really figure out what they need, want, and hope for, and to try to get rid of things that they don't need in that space. Like this mold stuff in some of those spaces is probably, the decor, they're great. I mean, the atmosphere in there is fantastic. But so Claude, I just want to thank you and be transparent about that's the struggle that we're trying to put through. On this. Would you want to add anything more about that part of it?
About,
How hard this is?
I'm good first.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I do want to, again, shout Cole out for all of his work. He went to the all student town hall meeting and he advocated for everybody there, so I'll give him a round. Fortunately, this is poor timing with Senate because this term is coming to an end and the start of the new, but hopefully with the incoming new term, that again, Senate can be more of a resource in this process. But all right. Representative report, starting with class of 2024. Our class of 2024 rep is not here. For their class, I know that senior week tickets have been released on university tickets and formal. So if you're a senior, get your ticket. All right, class of 23, sorry.
I can read off.
Oh, perfect.
I think it was important. Caps and gowns order forms have been sent to all graduating senior school emails, and the deadline to order pickup in store orders is March 13th. And then ship to home orders is April 18th. And then contact the Davini bookstore if you have any questions. And senior formal tickets are also now available in university tickets. That's open until April 1st, and only while like the tickets are still there. So if you get them fast.
Perfect, thank you, I appreciate that. All right, class of 25. Which the rep is not here. Any updates for the class of 2025? All right, class of 2026.
All right, we just want to thank everyone who came to our paint and sip event on Friday night. It went incredibly well. We went through over 150 drinks, 100 food vouchers in maybe 30 minutes. So big thank you to everyone who came and supported our event. It was definitely one for the book.
Okay, thank you. Class of 2027.
Freshman council just had their first event in the semester. It was this Friday, and I would say it was an all-around success.
Resident representative.
I would just say that housing deposits are due March 15th for residents returning for the next academic year. And that's what I pretty much have. And then April 15th is when housing selections do start.
Thank you. Commuter representative.
Caitlin Bevins has finally talked to everyone who signed up for the commuter interest form. We have our first meeting Thursday, March 7th at 12:30 p.m. outside the campus center bookstore. We're gonna be discussing plans for the end of the semester and preparing for the next. This is all I have, but I would like to thank everyone here and my constituents for making this term a great one.
Alrighty then, sappy term ending stuff is about to begin. For me, alright. Senators' comments, the floor is open for senators' comments, so we'll go, Secretary Sheeny, Senator Hunt, Senator Cloutier, and Secretary.
Yeah, I was playing pool yesterday in the bottom of the campus center, and the pool cues are all like absolutely awful. Like there's no tips to the pool cues. And like the surface of the table also like needs upkeep. So I was thinking like, what could we do about that? Bringing it up to everybody. And then also I remember like last semester someone brought up like a piano or like music tuning. I thought maybe like that would be a good thing to bring up and address.
Thank you. Alright, Senator Hunt.
Just because I am doing this is a little advertising plugin for this coming weekend. As I kind of said, this coming weekend I call it Nerd Weekend. The reason behind it is because Comic-Con is Saturday. Warp General Meetings, Comic-Con's Friday, Warp General Meetings Saturday. Also I found out BSAA is doing a video game tournament, happens to be this Saturday, so that kind of worked out. And then finally, Mario Kart is March 10th, which President Alvord will actually have his own kart as his own character.
Yeah. I'm so excited for that, so.
I'm so
Alright, thank you, Senator Cloutier.
This is just something that I've heard from people that play club sports and intramural sports is that Ben Kern's position ended on March 1st, and I was just wondering if anyone had any information on who's taking over for him.
So we're working on refining the job description. We will do a national search, but anybody who we would probably won't want to leave their current position mid-year. So it's typically going to be a start of June 1st. So Jen Collins is working with different people in athletics to assign them different responsibilities, and they'll receive stipends during that time period. I'll remind Jen that she's got a little busy with all these championships, you know, but I'll have her come back and report to you all, okay?
Thank you. What is that pertaining to what we just said? Okay, Secretary Souza.
So mine is kind of a lot, so sorry that you're gonna have to know this, but mine's about rollover reports, and so they're due this Sunday. So this report is like every other report mandatory, but these ones are like especially mandatory because I know there's been like some reports that like maybe you're like, oh, like I have nothing to report this week, like you will have something to report in your like roller report, like there is no option to just submit nothing. You have to submit them by Sunday, and like I'm going to like bother you if you don't submit it by Sunday because they need to be in before this meeting. What they should include is on Kodiak already. I pinned something up to the top from like last year. I'm just gonna use the same ones as like example ones. So there's one for what College of Arts and Sciences one looks like, and then one that President Alvord made of the finance one. So it shows what a committee one and a constituency one should look like. So it covers all the bases. They're very good reports. So and then there also I made a template based on like one of those reports that I put in there as well for you to like directly follow. So there really should be like a very good outline of what they should look like. They should include a bunch of things as well as like obviously all the important things you accomplished over the course of this term, like important events, important meetings, projects, all sorts of stuff like that. You can also include who is in the constituency committee, whatever. So like for example, like Chairperson Kaufman's gonna put every member of the legislative committee, even if they're no longer on Senate, include their names, just put former. In your constituency, if you're like senator at large, you're going to put every member of the constituency since you've been there. You guys should all be working together. I know sometimes like people will switch on and off for who submits reports weekly. It should be a combined effort because this is a long report. So just include everything that you think is the most important in your report and everything that's outlined on the template for what you should include. And if you have any questions about whether you should or shouldn't include it, ask instead of just not putting it in or just put it in anyways. And if it's unnecessary, then it could just be taken out. But you can ask myself or President Alvord if you have any questions about how to do these reports. And yeah, make sure you look at Kodiak for the sample templates, all sorts of stuff like that.
All right, thank you. Sorry. All right, Thank you. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Those abstaining? Motion passed.
Yeah. I have Jeff from 12 to 3 and he works from 3 to 4. Yeah, like they.
We'll start all fast.
What if they're valid events they don't? Actually.
That's fine.
Kevin, thank you for taking a look at this.
This is super common.
Is this the cloud or the?
Yeah, that's awesome.
I actually, do you wanna stop it right now and then, if it takes time to load, I'll just come back later.
Okay.
Just one after that spring break, then the one after spring break. We got it.
Thank you guys.
So I'll turn it down.
Yes.